Hello, everyone. As a result of the inclement weather, we will not be able to meet in class on Thursday, so I've decided to post a recorded lecture. As I indicated yesterday, the exam will go on Tuesday the 16th. If you have any questions, you can email me. I'll go over the study guide, especially the short essay questions. And if you have further questions, you can email me. Last lecture, we started talking about the geography of languages. We established the fact that languages are a means of communication. It's an integral part of the cultural identity of people. And it's also used to communicate, especially with their religious practices, singing and praying. Languages are also ascribed to people's ethnicity. Today, we're going to continue with our geography of languages. Let me get to the lecture notes. We ended up by talking about lingua franca on last lecture, which was last Thursday. We said a lingua franca is a common language that is used amongst people that can belong to different countries, but it is a means of communication and is used for trade purposes. Now let's take a look at this short clip about why learning English is essential for Myanmar residents, formerly known as Burma, in Southeast Asia. It's taking a little longer to upload.
These school children in rural Myanmar are learning their first words of English and are part of a boom in language learning in the country. As political change fuels new opportunities for young people, many are choosing to learn a new language to improve their job opportunities. While English is still a popular choice, demand for Chinese, Japanese and Korean is also growing, as many students dream of jobs in multinationals and are influenced by popular culture from across Asia. Argus Ang works for a Singapore-based education and training business.
But we see a huge pickup again in English, a huge pickup in terms of Mandarin and Japanese, and as well as Koreans.
Some students are choosing to study a foreign language because of newly relaxed travel restrictions and international interests sweeping their country. This young man hopes to learn French and one day open a company to help Myanmar nationals visit Europe.
I would like to learn French and other European languages because I want to go to Europe to study and to work also. Because I want to set up a company in Europe countries.
Some say the desire to study and learn new languages is not new in a polyglot country at the heart of Asia, made up of a patchwork of ethnic minorities, each with their own distinct language and identity. 14-year-old Kim Yoon Thar comes from an ethnic Chinese family.
I'm learning 3 languages: English, Myanmar, and Chinese. English, I learn it because I'm going to foreign countries. I hope to go there. And Chinese is because my mom and dad are Chinese, and my mom thinks that China is gonna be well developed soon, so I need to speak in Chinese. Myanmar is I'm in Myanmar, so I learn Myanmar in order to communicate with people, Myanmar citizens in this country.
For students like Miss Keen Yoon Thar, learning both Mandarin and English may well prove to be a worthwhile decision, as foreign companies flood into Myanmar, hoping to tap into what some expect to become a $200 billion economy by 2030. Ben Marino, Financial Times, Yangon.
Okay. Let's talk about official languages. An official language is a language that is used by the government to enact laws, publish documents, and conduct other public businesses. So it's sort of a standard language, like the language they use in our parliaments, state parliament and national parliament in Washington, D.C., the language they use to publish newspapers and other official documents, and also the language used to conduct businesses, whether signing trade treaties with other countries or bilateral agreement with neighboring countries like Mexico or Canada, or other countries in Europe or in Africa or Asia or Latin America. So it's sort of the standardized language of a country. A working language is designated by an international organization or corporation as their primary means of communication in terms of daily correspondence and also conversation amongst their workers. For instance, the United Nations, the global body, which comprises of 193 member states, sovereign states, 193 countries, has 6 working languages that they speak during their deliberations in New York. The 6 languages are English, French, Arabic, Spanish, Russian, and Chinese. If you have listened to an online or on TV, a US proceeding, like the General Assembly, you will observe that most of the delegates have earphones in their ears. And that gadget, which includes the earphone, converts what one speaker is speaking to other languages so that the other members at the meeting will be able to hear what the speaker is saying. For instance, if an Arabic speaker from Saudi Arabia or a Spanish speaker from Mexico is addressing the United Nations, all other speakers will be able to hear what he or she is saying in their own languages, because that converter box will convert it to, whether it's converted to English or French or Russian or Chinese, as the case may be. So a working language, again, is one that an organization or a corporation uses for daily correspondence or for specific conversation amongst its workers. And there are several informal languages. The mixing of French and English, some English words in French, is known as franglais, like t-shirts and shoes also are now used in French. Then Spanglish is a mixture of Spanish and English. There are a few Spanish words now that have been incorporated into English. And when you mix English words in German, it is known as Denglish. I must point out that this is not something that has occurred widely, but there are a few words, English words, that have been incorporated into these 3 languages. A pidgin language is a language that is a mixture of words from a common language, which we normally call a lingua franca, and then it has a few other words from a different language. For instance, in West Africa, coastal West Africa, like places like Nigeria or Cameroon, they have what is called a pidgin language, a pidgin English. That's a mixture of local words and the English language. You will not be able to understand it much if you're just an English speaker. But if you know some of the native languages, you'll be able to understand when they speak. A pidgin language is not it doesn't have native speakers as such. It's not a language of a particular group of people, but it's a language of several people that live, especially in big cities, and so they can understand each other. But it is not a language of a particular native group or a particular local. It's a language that's a mixture, as I said, of some common language or a common language and some elements of some native languages. So that's a pidgin language. Now there's a question for you, even though this is a virtual recorded message. One thing that you might find surprising in this map is that English language is not an official language in the United States, in the United Kingdom, where of course English started, and also in Australia and New Zealand. So a question for you could be, why is English language not an official language in the United States? Those in favor of that will argue that the United States is a diverse country where multiple languages conglomerate, so there is no need to have English as an official language. Some people will say the diversity brings strength, and it's the country that was built of immigrants and of course Native Americans, so we should maintain English as not the official language. Others might counter and say, why should English not be the official language? It's the most predominant language in America. The federal government should mandate that English should become the official language so that documents can be printed, everything can be in English, which will bring unity and strengthen the efficiency of the use of English. It might even cut down on cost because we can stop to broadcast advertisement, political adverts in Spanish or other languages. And also we can stop to people to take driver's license exam in Russian or in Spanish as they do in some states like Michigan and Ohio. Others will counter that if you make English the official language, you're going to weaken the importance of other languages. Other people will be sort of marginalized. Others might counter that further and say that if you want better communications, you need English as an official language. It might, even for emergency purpose, you can be able to communicate with somebody and be able to know what is wrong with him or her, rather than waiting for an interpreter which might not be available. It might surprise some of you that even the United Kingdom, where English originated, they don't have English as the official language. The predominant language is the most common language spoken, just like English here, but it is not an official language. The same for Australia and New Zealand. So as you think about the pros and cons of English being the official language, look at it from the point of view of an American citizen, and also look at it historically and perhaps patriotism, so you'll be able to take your own stance. Nevertheless, there are 56 countries in the world where English is the official language. Most of these countries were colonized by Great Britain, and they imposed English as the official language in those countries. Increasingly, a good number of citizens in those countries now speak English. But in the early days, most of them were not even able to speak English, except the very few that were in parliament, the very few that were educated. Majority in those countries were not able to speak English. But now with increased schooling in the English language, in those 56 countries, a good number of their citizens can now speak English. So of those 56 countries, that accounts for about 2 billion people around the world where English is their official or predominant language, accounting for 2 billion of the 7.8 billion people across the world. As you can see in the map, a number of these countries are in Africa, especially East, some in West, and a good number of them in Southern Africa. You see some of them in South Asia, like India and Pakistan, and a few of them in Southeast Asia, like the Philippines, Papua New Guinea, etc. Even though English is not the official language of the United States, from the federal government perspective, there are about 26 individual states, that is subdivision of the United States, that have English as the official language. As you can see from the map, Oklahoma is one of those states. Oklahoma is one of those states where English is the official language, as with Kansas, Missouri, amongst others. But our southern neighbor, Texas, English is not the official language. Some people will say because they have a lot of Spanish immigrants in Texas. One surprise here is California. English is the official language in California, even though we have a good number of Latinos in California, but English is the official language there. So, I mean, perhaps, just speculation, perhaps in the next 2 or 3 decades, English could become the official language of the entire country of the United States. But for now, the states in blue here have English as the official language, but those in yellow do not have English as the official language. And as I mentioned earlier, at the federal policy level, English is not an official language of the United States. It's a predominant language, widely spoken, widely used, but it has not been declared official language. A dialect. A dialect is a regional variation of a language. It is distinct in terms of vocabulary, spelling, and pronunciation. When United States, the founding fathers came and settled the United States, they brought English over. And Webster, who first created the Webster Dictionary, decided that apart from political independence from Great Britain, we should have some form of lexicon independence. So he deliberately modified some of the British English spellings in the American Webster Dictionary. So that's why we see words with different spellings here. And also in terms of pronunciation, some of them are pronounced differently. I'll just give a few examples, like center. In the British English, it is spelled C-N-T-R-E. In American English, it is C-N-T-E-R. Neighbor. In the British English, it's N-E-I-G-H-B-O-U-R. In the American English, the U is dropped. It ends with B-O-R, the same like labor. In terms of vocabularies, the American English have a richer vocabulary because America is a bigger country, physically and environmentally more diverse. And as a result, when the founding fathers came, they had to find names of some of the new things they met here. And they were helped by Native Americans. Words like moccasin, canoe, are words that were incorporated into the American English thanks to the Native Americans that were using those words. Canoe, moccasin, amongst others, are now in the American English. So in terms of the British English and American English, vocabulary is different. In some cases, some spellings are different and some pronunciations are different. Another example in terms of vocabulary is elevator. We say elevator here. In Britain, they say lift. Here we say, normally we say restroom. They normally say toilet. We say trash can, the British will say dustbin. And the other thing that led to distinct vocabulary and spelling was lack of interaction. When the founding fathers came and eventually settled down, there was little, if any, interaction with the people of England and other parts of Britain. So consequently, distinct dialect emerged. As I pointed out last class, when people remain isolated for a long time, having migrated from an original place, they migrated to various places and settled down. Because of lack of interaction with their original place or place of origin, distinct languages emerged. And that was how distinct vocabulary and spellings and even pronunciation emerged, leading to a different dialect. Yes, we do understand each other for a greater part, but there are some words that are totally different in terms of spellings or in terms of pronunciation. Like route, bus route. The British is bus route. Another interesting spelling is check. You write a check to pay somebody. C-H-E-C-K in American English. It is C-H-E-Q-U-E in British English. It's pronounced the same way, but the spellings, as you may have observed, is quite different. One dialect is normally used as the standard language in most countries, and that standard language is technically the official language, that dialect that is clear-cut, which doesn't include slangs and other things. So if you're talking about the language that reputable TV stations use here, like the CNN, Fox News, it's standard English, standard language. And what they use in our parliament and the capital is standard English. Whilst universities across the country use a standard language. But what you can talk informally can include slangs and other jargons, which is constitute other dialects, but not necessarily standard language. So the standard language and the official language is pretty much one and the same thing. This diagram shows different vocabulary words that's differently used to referring to an automobile. Notice here the words in bold refers to the British or English spellings. The ones in light color are the American spelling. What we call truck, they call lorry. What we call speed bump, as you may have seen, they call it sleeping policeman. And what we call crosswalk, they call it zebra crossing because of the stripe of a zebra, black and white, horizontal stripe of a zebra. And most crosswalk have black and white paintings. We call it gas station, they call it petrol station, etc., etc. So this shows clearly in terms of the automobile, the different vocabulary that are used referring to the same part of a vehicle, but or the parts of the road, but you see quite different. One interesting one, it took me a couple of years to adjust to, is hood and bonnet. Coming from a British background, I was used to bonnet, but I had to adjust to hood in my first 2 years in the US. The same for boot, and here we call it trunk. An isogloss is a word that has a geographic boundary line. Here we see yearl. If you go to a place like New York in the Northeast, they don't use yearl. But here it's an isogloss that is common in southern parts of the United States. In the United States has 3 main dialects, and the 4th one in the West, which is a derivative of the Midland dialect. The first dialect here is in the North. It originated from East Anglia, which is one of the islands of the Great Britain. And it was developed in the New England area. New England includes Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, amongst others. So that language was developed, but the early founding fathers that came from East Anglia came with that dialect, and most of them settled in New England. Then later on, the Southern dialects, they originated from Southeastern England, which includes part of London, Southampton, etc. And they were of diverse background, and they came and settled in the south of the United States. Then those in the Midlands, they came from Northern England, places like Manchester, Liverpool, amongst others, and they settled in Pennsylvania. That was where the Midland dialect developed. And interestingly, most of those people that settled in Pennsylvania and neighboring states like Delaware, because of pressure for land, competition for land, a good number of them eventually migrated westwards to the west coast of the United States, to places like California, Oregon, and the state of Washington. So that's why the Western dialect has some similarity with the Midland dialect. The Midland dialects in some of the East Coast states like Delaware and Pennsylvania, a good number of them eventually migrated to the West Coast. So these are the dialects and subdialects of the United States. You may notice here that Green Country, northeastern Oklahoma, is part of the Midland dialect. And as you go further south of the state of Oklahoma towards McAllister, it's more of the southern dialect. I've heard that in some people from southern Texas have slightly different pronunciation of some words than those here in Oklahoma. I've heard of that. And even people from places like Louisiana, their accent and some of their vocabulary is slightly different from what we are used to here in Oklahoma. So the sub-dialects are very, very similar. They can have similar pronunciation, similar words, but different dialects definitely have some degree of difference in terms of pronunciations, in terms of spelling, and generally in terms of vocabulary. I like this map. It talks about the various names that are used for soft drinks, and this clearly depicts isogloss, regional extent of names of soft drink. As you see there in the Northeast, around New York, New Hampshire, Maine, etc., the soft drinks generally referred to as soda, as in California and other places in the southwest of the country. When you go southwards, most southern states here refer to soft drink as Coke. So imagine you travel from, let's say, Georgia, and you go to, let's say, Maine, and you say, I want Coke. Then they will bring you Diet Coke or regular Coke. You say, this is not the Coke I want. I want another Coke. So if the person doesn't know that, know that when you say Coke, you're referring to various types of soft drink, then that can be an issue, because as far as that waiter or waitress in a restaurant or a bar in Rhode Island is concerned, he or she might know of just Diet Coke and regular Coke. So you might have to explain further for him or her to know that you are referring to various types of soft drinks. You might need Dr. Pepper, you might need Pepsi, etc., etc. Then in the North Central and Northwest, pop is the most popular name for soft drink. And I've heard from previous classes that there are a few other names. A student told me about 3 years ago that in parts of Arizona, some of them call it carbonated water. That is what they refer to soft drinkers. So there could be some other names. It might be interesting to find out if there are some other local names in other parts of the country. But based on this map, there are 3 popular names: pop, mainly in the central, upper Midwest, and Northwest; soda, mainly in the Northeast and in the Southwest; and Coke, mainly in the southern part of the country and Southeast. As you look at the map of the state of Oklahoma, you may notice that places like McAllister, closer to the Texas border, they use Coke mainly. Whereas we that are residing here in Green Country, what is more popular is pop. So in some states, there are more than 1 names, depending on where in the state you are located, more names to describe soft drinks in general. We also have, apart from the standard American English, we also have the Appalachian English, which they use mainly in rural areas in places like West Virginia, parts of rural Pennsylvania, and they normally use some amount of double negative at times. In front, they also have an A in front of words that end with ing, like a walking, or they can say, I aren't going there no more, double negative. Then you have the African American vernacular English, which is normally referred to as Ebonics. This was a means of communication that was used, especially during the days of slavery, wherein they can communicate and the slave masters will not know exactly what they are saying. The Appalachian English and the African American vernacular languages of English are still in existence, but there are some drawbacks there. If you don't know how to speak standard English, it will be difficult for you to get into the job market easily. But for those who know those dialects of English, if I can put it that way, Appalachian English and African American English, it's a form of cultural identity. It's a form of cohesion amongst people that belong to those groups. But when it comes to competition or to get into the job market, a standard English will put you at a better position. And there is also the American Sign Language, which was initially developed by Thomas Carlaudet of Connecticut around about 1817. Sign language has evolved over time. The basics are there, but it has changed a little bit over time. But it's still a part of our community. Normally, if you see politicians and giving speeches, almost always you'll see an interpreter, sign interpreter there, and trying to communicate with people that are deaf. Some classes, if you have a special needs student, you can have somebody there translating for him or her during a class. One interesting thing to note is there are some tiny countries and some big countries that have multiple languages. Switzerland in Central Europe is a very small country, but there are 4 official languages. We're going to talk about them shortly. Belgium is also a tiny country in Europe. It has 2 regions and it has 2 distinct official languages. Nigeria, I think it's now the 7th or so most populous country in the world, about 180 million people. Nigeria has 529 languages. There are 3 major ones. We'll take a look at the map shortly. Then in Canada, English is the dominant language, but you have French in Quebec. French in Quebec, they are the minority, but English is the majority language in Canada. So this map shows Switzerland. Notice the 4 official languages. German, about 65% of them speak German. About 18% of them speak French. About 11% of them speak Italian. About 1% of them speak Romansh. You may ask, how do they coordinate issues peacefully? How do they coexist peacefully in Switzerland, even though there are 4 different languages and multiple ethnicities? They rely mainly on local government. Most of the decisions are taken at local government level. If there is a national issue, they will vote in what is known as a referendum, a yes/no vote. If 2/3 of the population says yes, that becomes a law, and those that said no have to respect that law. So local government, a form of decentralization, local government prevails. They have so much power at the local level. So technically, you keep everybody happy. The Germans, in the majority, central and north of the country, you keep them happy. The French, in the west of the country, you keep them happy. The Italians, in the south, central of the country, you keep them happy. The Romansh, just 1%. In the central eastern part of the country and part of the east, you keep them happy. So local government is popular in Germany. Most of the social issues, education, religious issues, health, law enforcement, all of those are done at local level. So that's why they coexist peacefully, even though there are 4 official languages in Switzerland. Belgium has 2 official languages. What you will notice here, in fact, just like in the case of Switzerland, not all of those languages in Switzerland belong to the same language branch. As we see there in the earlier map, let's go back to that map. We see that German is part of the Germanic branch, but French, Italian, and Romansh are part of the Romansh branch of language. So you see 2 different branches of languages operating in the same country. Likewise here, you have in the north, you have the Flanders region of, in light gray here, the Flanders region of Belgium. Flemish is the official language that they use there. And Flemish is a derivative of the Dutch language, which is part of the Germanic branch. And in the south of Belgium, Wallonia region, they speak French. French is part of the Romansh branch of languages. You may notice here, Brussels, the capital of Belgium, is also the capital of the European Union. The northern part of the Flanders region of Belgium is a very rich region, unlike the Wallonia region that is really poor. There have been moves to separate, to create 2 countries, but it has not been a fruition, and that will create a problem. If the Flanders region of Belgium should become an independent country, Wallonia will become the poorest country in the entire Europe. So not much in Wallonia, but the Flanders region of Belgium is doing well. So as a country, they're able to carry on reasonably well. Nigeria, as I mentioned just now, has 529 languages. The three most dominant ones are Yoruba, Igbo, and Hausa. The Hausas are mainly in the north. You see it here in yellow. The Igbos are mainly in the east, and the Yoruba are mainly in the southwest. But they have multiple other languages. Some of them have very few speakers. And as you see there, the languages belong to various families. Afro-Asiatic, that is where the Hausa language belongs to. Then the Nilo-Saharan is where the Kanuri in the northeast belong to. And of course, the Niger-Congo, most of their languages in Nigeria are part of the biggest family of languages in Africa, the Niger-Congo family of languages, which account, as you may recall, for 95% of languages in sub-Saharan Africa. 7,099 languages you may recall from last lecture, but some of them are dying. The United Nations defined an endangered language as one that children are no longer learning, and its remaining speakers use less frequently. So there are four categories here. We have vulnerable languages. They still have speakers, but not too many. 592 languages are vulnerable. Then you have 640 languages that are definitely endangered. The speakers are being reduced. The youths are not learning these languages. Most of those that are learning these languages are still speaking these languages are in the rural areas. Then you have 537 severely endangered languages. This is a case where no new speakers are learning these languages. Most of the old people in the villages are getting older, and once they die, those languages become critically endangered, and eventually they become extinct. So as we think about languages in the midst of globalization, where uniformity is gaining momentum around the world, think about the number of languages that die every year or every decade. On average, about 5 languages die every year. So for a decade, you're thinking about at least 50 languages dying. And that rate of language extinction might be accelerated as the wave of globalization increases around the world. So not all languages are going to survive by the next century. So this map shows endangered languages, critically endangered in yellow, definitely endangered in light blue, and severely endangered in purple. So notice everywhere, every major region in the world, you have endangered languages. But we see here that in Latin America, there are several endangered languages, severely endangered and definitely and critically endangered. The same for Southeastern Asia. In Africa, it's the central part of Africa where we have a lot of dying languages, as in the western part of the United States. Several languages are critically endangered. Nevertheless, there have been moves to preserve languages. 2 organizations have been instrumental in trying to preserve languages: the United Nations and the European Union. The European Union has been trying to preserve languages that belong to the Celtic branch of languages. You may recall when we talked about the history of Britain last lecture, we found out that the Celtics were the original people, but they were forced to move northwards to Scotland because of the various invasions that occurred from the 5th century until the Normandy came in and took control of Britain for 300 years when they invaded in 1066. And as you may recall, for 300 years, French became the official language of Britain. So now they are trying to preserve the Celtic languages, that branch of languages, that family of languages, sorry, that includes Irish, Welsh, and Breton. They have been taught in schools, they are used in newspapers, and they encourage kids to learn those languages. Those languages are spoken in the United Kingdom, in Ireland, and in some parts of France, like the Brittany region of France. The United Nations is also trying to get, with the help of Ethnologue and a few other organizations, to catalog the languages that are endangered and try to encourage those languages to be in written form for them to belong to literacy tradition and to encourage people to learn them. But it's going to be a tough challenge, especially for the languages around the world, wherein because of the mass movement to cities, those rural areas are losing the young ones. And once they get to big cities, the dominant language is what they focus on. Dominant languages like Spanish, Arabic, English, French, Portuguese, amongst others. So preserving languages is good, but it's an uphill task how we can preserve some of these languages. The European Union is doing a fantastic job, but United Nations, a global organization, they are trying, but it's going to be tough to be able to preserve some of these endangered languages. So you see the map of Britain here, United Kingdom and Ireland, Irish, Welsh, Cornish, Irish meaning Ireland, Welsh in Wales, Cornish is also spoken in parts of Britain, and of course, I think around Cornwall in the south. Most of the local government, as I said, are trying to promote these languages. Newspapers taught in school in some cases, and also used for broadcasting on TV and radio. Hebrew has been going with the establishment of Israel in 1948. Remember, there has been a series of wars in Israel. A number of the Jews are here, about 40% of them are in the United States. But once the state of Israel was created, Ibn Ben Zehuda was one of the people that developed the Hebrew dictionary and added new words. Most of the electronic devices that have been made, manufactured over the past 50 years were added to the Jewish dictionary. So they have a rich vocabulary. Ben Zehuda was responsible for adding about 4,000 new words into the Jewish language dictionary. Then here at home here in Oklahoma, the Myanmar people have their native language, the Myanmar language, and they are trying to revive it. They are trying to put it in writing so that kids can learn it. As you can see here, you see a man teaching supposedly 2 kids. I don't know whether they are his kids, but he is teaching them the Myanmar language that they use in Myanmar here in Oklahoma. Expansion diffusion of English has been on the increase, like a snowballing effect, how English has expanded. New words and vocabulary are being added to the English dictionary every year or so. And the Oxford Dictionary in Britain and the Webster Dictionary here, they add new words regularly. As I mentioned last class, a word that was added recently last year to the Oxford Dictionary is next tomorrow. When I was growing up in Africa, we used to use that in our local lingua franca, next tomorrow, which means the day after tomorrow. So if today is Thursday, next tomorrow will be Saturday. Now it's an acceptable word that has been incorporated into the Oxford Dictionary. Some of the words we use now in social media, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, perhaps in the next 5 or 10 years, some of them will be added to the Oxford and the Webster Dictionary. The popularity of the word, clear meaning of the word, increases that word's chance of getting into these 2 prominent dictionaries. Words like cowboy, hamburger, t-shirt are now diffused into French language. We see also Spanish word, English like penguin, in Spanglish penguin instead of estacionamiento. So those are other words that have been added. There is one dialect of a language, perhaps a language by itself, that was created and was used, and it is still being used a little bit in a county in California. So now I'm going to play a clip so that you can learn a little bit about this language known as Bootling. It has an interesting, though controversial history. Let's watch the clip.
Well, this language we speak, now what's left of it was Bootling. It's Boonville lingo, and it's just shortened, Bootling lingo or language.
The Oldham didn't want to cook up any gorms, so I had to come over here and get dehigged by you.
To Palico to Horn Fratty, and you're going to Pike to the Briny.
The language kind of continues to kind of fade and come back in popularity. It seems like about a 10 to 20 year cycle.
Well, I'd say for the last 15 years or so, it's just gradually went downhill. The young people doesn't take it up like they used to. They're not that interested in it.
It's sad. It's sad that the language is not being taught in the school as it was taught when my children were in elementary school, 3rd grade.
Boonville Californians, where instead of English, along with English, they speak kind of a jargon of their own. And it is considered a legitimate and complete language, was even taught as a second language in schools in that area, sanctioned by the state of California. So we thought you might enjoy meeting a resident and hearing this native tongue tonight. And I guess up there they call him a boonter. Would you welcome Bob Glover? Bob Glover.
The look on Bobby's face when Johnny Carson harped his non-sharpens was well worth it because it certainly caught Bobby by surprise.
And he went down to the program a couple of times, I think 3 times altogether, maybe 4, and was interviewed by Carson. And of course that pretty much brought national attention to the language.
The Tolefan lines have been almost jeffered ever since by Kimmies and dames of Sheikh's Tel Aviv Beach.
Is there a drinking problem at all in Boonville?
It was one of really 2 authentic American kind of subculture languages. There was something like the Appalachian folk language, and then Bootling were like 2 kind of subset languages of English. Everything else were kind of like the Pig Latin kinds of things that didn't really count as languages.
How did this jargon, this local dialect, come about?
Believe it or not, John, it was started by the ladies. It was started about 90 years ago in the hop fields of Bell Valley. And there was a young lady working there who was pregnant without the benefit of marriage.
And so they wanted to talk about this girl who was in the family away, but they didn't want to embarrass her and talk right out in front of her. So they started coining a few words. And the girl didn't understand them, so they went home that night and told her husband from sheep shearing camp what they had found, what this started this. The husbands, they packed it to the sheep shearing camps and started using it there too, and it just kind of blossomed out from there. In the Boonville language, there's roughly around 1,480 to 1,500 words. If you added a word to the language, you had to get the approval of the group, the old booters. In other words, what we'd do, we'd come up and think of a word, and it had meaning, background, and everything. And then in order to break it into the old booters, in a conversation, we just kind of casually drop that word on them. And we wouldn't say any more about it, just drop the word and keep on talking, And they wouldn't ask you what the word meant. No, they'd figure it out. And after a couple of weeks, they'd come around, I figured out what the word means.
Deacon the Telfie for Chipmunk on the Weeshike Beach were plenty subtled when Shike harped notch on Bootling this D. That's correct. You understand what I... Oh, yes. Yeah. Do you realize there's only 100 people in the country that know what the hell I just said?
For every word in Bootling, there's a story.
Churl is a word for milking the cow. And that comes from the sound of the milk hitting the bottom of the milk bucket. Churl.
If it's your wife, Eildam, that's from your old dame.
Bucky Walter. The first person in this valley to own a phone's name was Walter. And if you wanted to use the phone at his house, he would charge you a nickel. Back in the nickel was a buckeye. So Bucky Walter's a payphone.
Horning Fratty, which is wine, drinking wine.
Sheep, they went all over the country cropping the grass off. They eat the grass right down, so they became a crappie.
If I went up to Boonville and was going to burlap somebody, would that be good or bad?
I'd say it'd be good.
I guess we can't explain what that...
I wish we could, John, but I don't think it'd be proper at this time. But I think the audience all knows
but
what
those people up in Boonville tonight will know what I'm talking about, huh?
They are rolling on the floor.
And if you're rolling on the floor, that's a good way to burlap, right?
It was like, oh my God, what Johnny Carson said. But in retrospect, nobody except those of us who harped boot knew what he said.
And what did he say?
I don't think I want to.
It really gives Boonville sort of a uniqueness of its own that other little towns don't have. I mean, everybody kind of wants to be special in some ways, I think. And the language certainly makes the valley a little more special.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that clip. So in summary, languages can be classified as belonging to a particular families. Some families are divided into branches and groups, but there are a few, as we notice. Korean language, Japanese language is just a language by itself. Even though they have dialects, they don't have branches, they don't have groups. English is part of the Germanic branch of the Indo-European family, which is the largest family, accounting for almost 47% of global speakers. People preserve local languages because of cultural identity as intimately intertwined with our local languages. But nevertheless, as we see, languages are endangered. Some of them are dying, some of them have been extinct. So with regards to the exam, we'll carry on with the exam on Tuesday. I'm going to go through some of the essay portion of your study guide. For the multiple choice, I expect you to read. If you have one or two questions, you may email me. But I expect you to cover them. If there is an inclement weather, if we have to do remote learning on Tuesday, the 16th, you will have to take the exam online. If the weather is okay, we return back to class, you will take the exam in class. So let me get on to the study guide essay question. Just a minute, let me get on to the okay. The first question was about reasons for population growth in the world. Let me see. And now, okay, the first question states, identify and describe two major factors that have led to significant world population growth over the past 60 years. So here I'll be thinking about things like improvement in medicine and better sanitation. Basic vaccines have been distributed across the world. Basic antibiotics are now available around the world. Then there has been increased sanitation. Those have led to increase in significant growth in world population. Take note there, the emphasis on world population, not a regional population like North America or Europe, it's world population. And remember, world population is increasing significantly in developing countries, countries in Asia, Latin America, and Africa. So those are the places where population is growing fast. Because of better medical provisions, basic medicine like vaccines, antibiotic, and improvement in sanitation, people are able to live longer, and as a result, population is growing fast. The second reason is cultural. Pro-life, religious practices, very limited, if any, use of contraception, contraceptive devices are some of the reasons why there are large family sizes. Some people look at children as insurance for old age, so they will take care of them when they are old. In some remote parts of Africa and Asia, some of these kids can help in farming, but that is on the decline. So the primary reason is mainly cultural, which includes religious practices, poor life. Most religions refrain from contraceptive use. The Catholics of Christians that are Catholics, born-again Christians, Hindus, Muslims are all pro-life groups. Then the local culture, they see children as wealth, gift of God. So if you have 5 or 6 kids, especially in the rural communities, they see it as a gift from God and also wealth. So those are the regions. 2 of the regions could include Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, South Asia, and Latin America. Take note, population is not growing fast in East Asia. So it's mainly Southeast Asia, South Asia, Latin America, and Sub-Saharan Africa. Those are the areas where population is growing fast. The next question talks about distinguish between folk and popular culture. Distinguish between folk and popular culture. With specific examples, you should give at least 2 examples of folk culture, at least 2 examples of popular culture. So the distinguish between here means what are the differences between folk and popular culture in terms of origin? The first issue is about origin. We know that popular culture, we know the origin, we know started it, we know designed it, we know sang the song, whereas folk culture is normally anonymous. It might start in multiple places. They just estimate the time. They don't know the exact person who started it and the exact year. That's with reference to origin. In terms of diffusion, folk culture diffuses slowly. Remember, local people in remote places. They diffuse it slowly, mainly by migration, which is a form of relocation diffusion. If they migrate with their culture, they diffuse it, but it's slowly. Popular culture diffuses fast, normally hierarchically, from places of authority to other places. For example, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, amongst others, started in a developed country like United States, spread to other developed countries, and eventually to developing countries. Commercial TV started in the United States in 1954, then to other developed countries, and eventually into developing countries. So that is a form of hierarchical diffusion. Most of these inventions or innovation will start in the city and eventually spread to the countryside, or what we normally call rural area. So that is for the diffusion. In terms of distribution, popular culture distributes fast and wide thanks to modern day technology. As long as you have the money to pay for it, you can get those services. Popular culture diffuses across the world, most parts of the world. A case in point is cell phone. Another one is Facebook. T-shirts, jeans, those things are distributed far and wide across the world, thanks to modern day transportation and communication and our electronic devices. They help to spread it. In terms of folk culture, it diffuses slowly and not widely spread. Just a few localized areas because it is normally localized. Of course, you know some of the folk culture here in Oklahoma. We talked about Pow in class the last time. Mardi Gras in Louisiana, amongst others, those are all folk culture. And popular culture, you know tons of them, from all our electronic devices to TV, to modern day t-shirt and jeans, all of those are part of popular culture. So be careful not just to state folk culture, what's all the things about folk culture and all the things about popular culture. The question says distinguish between, show the difference is between. You have to use conjunctions. With reference to origin, popular culture is that, whereas folk culture is that. For example, you give the examples. With reference to diffusion, popular culture diffuses slowly, mainly through migration, which is a form of relocation diffusion, whereas folk culture diffuses slowly, mainly a form of relocation diffusion, whereas popular culture diffuses rapidly, hierarchically, rapidly across various parts of the world. In regard to distribution, folk culture is distributed slowly, mainly in 1 or 2 remote places, whereas popular culture is distributed across the world in several places, thanks to modern day technology and the affordability of that technology. Cell phone usage, as I mentioned last class, is spread widely across the world. TV has grown significantly. Facebook about 3 billion users across the world. That's about 40% of the global population. So all of those are thanks to the availability of technology and the affordability. One can be able to pay for those things. Question 3, identify and discuss 2 major reasons why people emigrate from other countries, why they leave their countries. If it is voluntarily, they voluntarily move, it's most likely because of economic reasons. They are pushed from their countries because they are unemployed, they don't have much in terms of money, then income or wages are low, or even they are unemployed, so they move out of their countries. In terms of forced migration, people are compelled to move because of wars, conflict, persecution, whether it's religious, whether it's sexual orientation, whether it's because of your ethnicity. People are pushed out of their country because of forced migration, out of emigration from their country because they are not safe in their countries. And why they immigrate to the United States? For most of the voluntary migrants, the main reason why they immigrate to the United States for better lifestyle, economic. They hope to come and get jobs and improve their conditions. Others that coming from those war-torn countries, part of it could be for social freedom. They want freedom, they want to live in a stable place, so they immigrate to the United States. So some of the pull factors here are the ability for people here to have opportunities, economic opportunities, and there is social freedom, there is human rights, respect for human rights, and the like. So all of those serves as pull factors attracting people to the United States. You should also indicate the 2 regions the bulk of the immigrants are coming from now, mainly from Asia and Latin America. Latin America, especially from Mexico, because of proximity to America. A good number of immigrants are coming. And the states that they settle most are the border states like California, Texas, Florida, and a reasonable number of immigrants are also in New York because of the historical importance and contemporary importance of New York. So those are the things I expect you to be getting ready for the essay portion of the exam. In terms of the multiple choice, I expect you to go through the study guide. If you have 1 or 2 questions, you can email me. I don't expect to receive 20 questions from you. That is not helping you. Go through the study guide, study. And if you have 1 or 2 things that are unclear, you can email me for 1 or 2 questions. Okay, hopefully weather will get better, and hope to see you in class on Tuesday. If the weather is still inclement, if we are still doing distant learning, you will have to take the exam online. All right. I expect a few emails from you. Don't hesitate to email me if you have any specific question. Bye, everyone.